20th, 2022 Committee of the Whole. First, we have a village president's finding that an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent. Due to the COVID-19 emergency, we're now conducting this meeting to be primarily virtual pursuant to Section 7E of the Open Meeting Act. Also, as required by law, at least one representative from the village will be present at the village hall board room, and the virtual meeting will be simulcast for members of the public who do not wish to view the virtual meeting from another location. Last, the board room can only accommodate a limited number of people, including members of a public body and village staff, while maintaining 6 feet of social distance between individuals. Accordingly, the opportunity to view this virtual meeting at the Village Hall is available on a first-come, first-served basis. And last, I would like to add that this is the last meeting we have under this format, as today's we are no longer required to wear masks. Next item is our call to order. Again, I would like to mention that it is February 20th, 2022, sunny 51 degrees Fahrenheit, committee of a whole meeting for the Lake Bluff Village Board of Trustees. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Ankerman?
Here.
Trustee Briand is absent. Trustee Fisher is absent. Trustee Marquis?
Here.
Trustee Rappin?
Here.
Trustee Ryder is absent. And President Charlot?
Thank you. Next is our non-agenda items and visitors for public comment. The Committee of the Whole allocates 15 minutes during this item for those individuals who would like the opportunity to address the Committee of the Whole on any matter not listed on the agenda. Each person addressing the Committee of the Whole is asked to limit their comments to a maximum of 3 minutes. We do not have anybody in this village hall. Do we have anybody online, Drew?
There are 3 individuals on the call at this moment. None of them are raising their hand. So 4. So there we go. It's growing, but nobody's raised their hand yet. Okay.
Thank you. So I suggest we move forward.
Yep.
Next item is our general business for this meeting. The Committee of the Whole will entertain requests from anyone present to modify the order of a business to be conducted. Any requests?
No, sir.
Thank you. 5A is our considerations of the minutes from the January 10th, 2022 Committee of the Whole meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
Thank you. Are there any changes?
None.
Nope.
Thank you. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Ankerman?
Aye.
Trustee Marquis?
Aye.
Trustee Rappin?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next is the discussion for tonight. That is the discussion regarding the Historic Preservation Commission recommendations. This is 55 pages. I have followed Steve's work for the past 2.5 years, and the task was absolutely consequential. The result shows tremendous research and careful consideration. And so tonight's document is comprehensive, well-written, thank you, Steve. And after tonight, may be instrumental for Lake Bluff. Steve, could you please start this discussion and lead us through a summary of this document? Thank you. First.
Sure. Thank you, and hello, everybody. I haven't seen a lot of you, and hopefully next time we do this will be in person. This is sort of my COVID project. You know, we started this right as COVID was starting, and there were mask mandates, and we're going to hopefully end this as COVID is ending and mask mandates go away. But it's been an interesting couple of years. When we met a couple of years ago, the trustees at that time were given good direction to the Historic Preservation Commission in looking at how do you encourage voluntary participation in historic preservation. That was the direction that we were given. Incentives rather than penalties for folks who wouldn't comply with with whatever regulations would be put in place. So what you see in front of you is really an incentive-based program that hopefully will meet your approval, that will result in an increased awareness of the history of Lake Bluff, an increased focus on our history and the preservation of our history as expressed in our architecture and structures through preservation, and a few financial incentives to really encourage those current homeowners of historic homes or future homeowners, the folks that are moving into town because of its historic nature, want to do something to fix up their home, and actually, if this passes, can look to the village for some financial support. So Regis, if it's okay with you, if I could spend no more than 6-7 minutes just outlining what we have put together.
Absolutely, Steve. Thank you.
Okay, so there's really three major areas. The first is an offshoot of this work. We've been working on this for 5-6 years, and one of the things we realized early on is that the amendment or the ordinance as written was showing its age. So we asked Glenn to keep documenting portions of the ordinance that needed administrative changes, needed some structural changes to make the process easier for residents, eliminating some of the documents that we weren't using to determine the historic value of a home, and making the process more streamlined. So what we are recommending is that those administrative and procedural changes that are incorporated into the new amendment and summarized in attachment 7, that you would consider those and adopt those as part of your consideration. They are not substantive. We're not changing the features of the historic preservation ordinance at all. We're not making it more strict. We're not making it less strict. We're simply making the process more streamlined, more efficient, and easier for residents. So that's number one. Number two, we discussed as a commission a lot of incentives, financial incentives, for encouraging individuals to consider landmarking their home, to consider voluntarily raising their hand and making their home a village landmark. There are 2 of them that we are presenting to you. The first is a series of property tax rebates. So one of the things that we think is important is recognizing the importance of historic preservation within the village. So we are recommending a property tax rebate for new landmarks. So those would be homes or structures that are not now under landmark protection, but that would be landmarked in the future. We're proposing a 50% rebate of the local tax portion of the property bill, the local portion of the property taxes, a 50% rebate with a limit of $2,000 a year for up to 8 years. And why 8 years? 8 years, that matches the maximum that the Illinois tax freeze for historic homes can be put in place. So if we have a new property owner who wishes to purchase a historic home, wishes to take advantage of the 8-year tax freeze from the Illinois state legislature, we think that having a 50% rebate on local taxes for that same time period makes sense. So that mirrors the provision in state law. The second, and this might be more controversial, this is a thank you to those 20-some structures who are landmarks in the village. This is saying thank you for doing what we want other people to do. And for a 1-year time period only, we would apply that same 50% rebate up to $2,000 for property taxes, most likely for the next fiscal year. The other financial incentive is increasing the building permit fee waiver for landmarks. Right now, the village waives 25% of the building fee. The building permit fee is 3% of construction value. We are recommending that be increased to 100%. Again, if the village is serious about looking towards historic preservation as one of the anchors, one of the things that we want to brand the village around, we think it's important to actually show those individuals who are interested in historic preservation and in rehabbing their home that the village is behind them and is serious. So let me pause there and see if there are any questions about those two financial incentives.
I had a comment that I wanted to just discuss. The $2,000 limited 50% rebate for current landmarks as a thank you that is being done after the fact. A concern that I have is that we would be setting a precedent that when situations change, when ordinances change, when programs change, that we need to turn the hands of time backwards and say, you know, for all those who might have or would have benefited for something like this, we need to do something to compensate for that. And it's a nice idea. Thank yous are always welcome by those who receive them. But the people who made the decisions that they did at the time that they did to renovate responsibly or to decide to demolish or not demolish, those decisions were made given a wide variety of factors, including the published building permit fees, et cetera, and once we kind of open up the door to say, oh, if the ordinances change or the world changes and now the situation is something different, that we have to go back and compensate. I think it kind of potentially exposes the village to a lot of calculations, a lot of inquiries, a lot of staff time, when the goal of affecting future renovations and potential demolitions is that's the goal of what we're doing, not to reward people who have been good stewards. You know, I appreciate that everyone has been a good steward, but I feel like that is a decision that's made in the past that I don't think we're obligated to financially reward because it would expose the village to financial compensation for other things and why this amount and not the same amount and et cetera, et cetera. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I hear you. I understand that, and I'm not sure it creates a precedent or not. But this was discussed very deliberately as a way to kickstart a rebranding of the village as a historic designation, and to create some buzz in the community among owners of historic homes. I understand everything you said, and that's why I'm not a policymaker. I'm a recommender. You folks will need to make that decision.
Yeah, I would hate to say that we're opening ourselves up to have people say, but what about, and I shoulda, and if they get this, then I'm not going to be happy with just that. So anyway, I don't think it's a good idea.
Joy, do you want to go and then I'll go after you?
Yeah, I had a couple of comments. So I like the idea of using financial incentives, and Steve, I think we've been talking about all these things for so long. So it's great to see this document. I thought it looked, I thought you took a lot of our feedback from the last meeting, and there was a lot of thoughtful consideration. So I appreciate that. The one thing I had a question about, I actually looked at the demo version of the map of homes that were considered significant. So there was two classifications. They're significant and contributing. And when you look on the east side of Lake Bluff, there's a lot of homes. And so my first question was, is if you are considered a contributing, not significant, but contributing, I'm assuming you can get a landmark designation. And then looking at the full amount of homes on the east side, I would say it's almost 50% of the homes are somehow designated. Have we thought at all? I mean, I don't think there's going to be a huge influx of people wanting to landmark, but have we looked at what could be the high end of the number of people that might want to landmark and how that might impact us financially? Because right now we have what, 23 homes or something. Did you all kind of look at the high end of how that might financially impact us if maybe say another 50 homes decided to landmark?
You know, I agree with you that there's not going to be a rush of property owners to landmark, put restrictions on their property. I mean, I've heard from a lot of residents over the last 10 years that I've been doing this, and there's not going to be a rush of people. Any incremental increase in the number of individuals would be welcomed, I think, but I don't think we're going to double the number. When we look at the homes, so let me back up a minute. So when you look at the survey, the historic survey is done of now the entire village, and you look at the designation of significant or contributing, those are designations that were made by the consultant that did the studies. And give their impression of the value, not the local historic value, but the value in the national sense of historic preservation. Our policy has been, as a commission and frankly as a village, that individuals who wish to preserve their home and have a home that has a story to tell, whether it's age, whether it's social history, whether it's the context of the neighborhood, how it supports the neighborhood that it is located in. We believe those are all worthy of historic preservation. So our net is cast wide. But to answer directly, I don't expect a rush to the doors when people realize that, while they would be thankful when they realize it's a 50% short-term rebate of a very small portion, thanks to your good work, a very small portion of their total tax bill. So I think this is nice. I think it focuses people in the right direction. And when you add all the incentives together, as the memo does on page 3, I think, or 4 or 5, it can become a fairly significant number, but I don't expect a rush.
Okay. And I guess thank you, first of all. And then I guess my second point might be, and I noticed that the increase for the fee waiver, we were going to say 100% of that would be waived. And I think there was another section in here where we talk about 100% of demolition fee going to a specific fund. I feel like 100% is a little high. I would be more comfortable like around 50% or 75%. That's just my own inclination, but and I don't know how the other trustees or the staff feels about that. That's just kind of my take on that. This is great work so far. I mean, I really like what you guys are focusing on.
And we hear you as well. And we debated 25%, 50%, 75%, 100%. And we ultimately said,
I know.
if we think it's a good idea, let's do 100%. And the village trustees can have that discussion based on the lens of economic reality that they're facing. So we wanted to give you our thoughts, and then certainly you'll need to factor in your other considerations.
Great, thank you.
Great. And I'll just make comments on what was covered so far by Mr. Kraus. The real estate tax rebate for 8 years makes perfect sense. That's a great incentive. The building permit fee from 25% to 100%, great. Let's encourage people to improve their historic homes and have them be gems in our community. The 1 year tax rebate for existing designations. Steve, could you just talk a little bit more? I mean, I don't know when those 20 homes were designated, I'm assuming that those residents made decisions based on the criteria at the time, whatever incentives there were at the time, or was it more that they were just really doing a solid to the village? Do we feel that we owe them this thank you for some reason?
We don't, no, we don't owe, other than thanking them, we don't owe them any additional financial support. They made their decisions, some of them 15 years ago, to landmark their home. And some as recently as a year or two ago to landmark their home. We just thought it would be a nice gesture. And again, think of this as a kickoff to a marketing campaign that is internally focused and already identifies, but reinforces the fact that the village believes that preserving the historic structures we have left in the village is important. And we have put in place certain mechanisms for new landmarks. And we have 23 existing landmarks. And we would just like to take this opportunity to thank you for doing what you have done in landmarking your property. I think that part would get a lot of discussion. There would be a lot of people that would go, well, either wow, that's really great, or what in the world are the trustees thinking of in rewarding someone for an act that was taken 15 years ago. It's there for your consideration. We understand, both perspectives on that.
Yeah, and great. Thanks for clarifying the internal branding, right? Because when you were talking about branding, I was thinking that we were going to position outwardly that we are a historic, historic house town, and I'm not sure that that's the complete picture, but certainly internally, branding the historic, trying to kick off your initiative makes sense. I do think that there are other ways to thank those 20 folks for everything they've done by featuring their homes and other things that you've done before. I really could go either way there, but I do understand where Trustee Ankerman is coming from in terms of setting the precedent. So I don't have a definitive opinion there, but I do like the direction that you're heading with the incentives.
I just had a quick follow-up question for Peter, since Peter's here. Peter, would that set a precedent?
Not a legal one, but I think what Trustee Engelman was saying was people may expect it or have an argument now that they got it, but not a legal one. No legal requirement, no legal precedent at all.
Okay.
Go
ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, please.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, have you seen that in other communities, Peter? Have you seen anything structured like that in other communities where you work?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay.
I can check, but I don't remember seeing anything where you specific to the ones that have already been landmarked.
Okay. Glenn, in your research, was there any look backs like that?
Yeah, there were not any look backs I'm familiar with, as you might have gathered from the memo. There's not a lot of this activity to look at who's looking back, as it were. I guess something I would offer for the group, if you're looking for a different way of looking at this, is you can, for those existing property, I guess two things. One, we say the owners made a choice. I would note that at least in one example, probably more than one, the property was landmarked involuntarily. So again, you have no obligation to reimburse them or anything, but just noting that that's not always a voluntary choice in these past examples. The second thing I'd note too, you don't have to, if you're not comfortable giving it to all the existing homeowners right out of the gate, you could condition it. You can let them get that year of eligibility after they put 20,000 into their home or something like that. You can find some ways to, create those opportunities if you're trying to let people feel like they're included, but also balance, wanting an affirmative action after you put these into place.
I guess I was looking at it from just a purely numbers perspective. If we've got 20 or so, is that right? 20 or so, Steve, with existing landmark, and we let's say it's 2,000 a person. We're starting out with a $40,000 budget to not necessarily gain anything. I mean, it's a great marketing campaign, but it doesn't have necessarily fruit to bear. And on some of these homes with the large, price tag of the existing home, of whatever the scale of renovation they would be doing, yes, a financial incentive is an incentive, but the bigger the home, the more valuable the home, the less the incentive has sway. And so people are doing this because of their convictions. People are doing this because of their love. People are doing these things for a lot of things. And yes, positive reinforcements are great and we need to do it. But I don't I still feel the way I do in terms of rewarding people who have already made that decision. And it also just opens you up to scrutiny. Like we're paying ourselves, meaning the small community that already exists that is passionate. And if we're passionate about moving forward, gaining some traction, let's apply effort and funds in that direction.
So
Yeah, we understand.
I would like to say something about that as well. You're absolutely right, Barbara. This is very small compared to the value of a house, and people have bought these houses out of love, and I completely agree with that. Now, you're absolutely right. Also, we don't really have a mean to force conservation. I mean, I'm going to use that word, and I'm very careful about using those two words together. We don't have that mean. Those are private properties, and we hope for the best for our community. Now, if we can have a tiny incentive to say, no, we really care as this government to say, no, we love those houses. Now, it's nothing in comparison to the value of these houses. But if we can influence the fact to say that, you know what, we'll help you conserve your house and we'll help you really care for that property by maybe being that last drop of water in that vase that might actually tip the scale in favor of conservation, then so be it. And for $40,000, that might be the cost to save a few houses that might no longer be here today. My question to Steve is, after Barb's question, that was very good about, okay, for $40,000, that's what we get. How much money could that cost us if I think there are 50 houses or something like that. If everybody was coming together and say, you know what, we want these incentives. I mean, what is our maximum exposure, I should say?
The maximum exposure would be the number of individuals who would want to voluntarily landmark their home, and then 50% of the village's portion of the property tax. I don't know the answer to that. I do know that when we had talked about more restrictive provisions as part of this, we were talking about 10, 15, 20 structures that we would really like to see landmarked, in addition to the 22 or 23 that already are. But I don't know. I can't tell you. We haven't. It is simply a question of how many people are moved by these provisions to landmark their home, and I just can't. I can't help you with a number.
So
the annual. I can't help you. That Glenn has calculated for the existing landmarks. The cost is $24,700. They're identified in Appendix 5. So it's a $24,700 one-year cost to do the rebate.
Can you tell me where that is again so I can find it in my 55-page document?
It is Appendix 5. It is in the memo that I think introduces everything. So it's Appendix 5 in the memo.
Oh, so it would be at the top in the beginning. I'm thinking Appendix 5.
The bulk of the 75 pages is the revised ordinance that.
Yes. Okay. So if the average is $1,200 in 1 year, right?
Right.
You said the average or the median, well, let's just say it's 1,200 and you get 20 more units to sign on, you're at 25K, right? Of additional. Right. My point was not that your financial incentives are not of value and merit for new homes who wish to designate. I'm not saying that. What I was suggesting is that to reward those who have already made that decision. I questioned that. So I just want to make that clear. I'm not questioning the value of these incentives for people moving forward. And the people who own those homes are the ones who are going to tell us whether it really works or not. You know, we've seen 20 odd homes in however many decades. So what's going to happen in the next few years will tell us how the value of those incentives. We don't think it's going to double the number in the next 3 years, but you know, doubling it would be probably the largest scale of influence that one could reasonably think about.
Can I add one final thought on the, I know we're beating a dead horse because this is only a $6,000 line item of rewarding the existing 20 homes, but it might be, you know, to Steve's point, if our community values historic homes and retaining them, and we want to have an internal marketing program, it might be that we provide consideration to those existing 20 homes in return for the ability to utilize them in internal marketing. And then it's really not setting a precedent. It's kind of a win-win.
Okay. Why don't we move on? Because I do want to get through all of these, and we're halfway through our hour. If we could go to zoning incentives, this is an area that might actually have, for selected property owners, might actually be very attractive. So
Steve, can I
Yeah.
stop you for a second? I know that we have about 4 or 5 people online that might have comments to provide as well along our board. Drew, do we have anybody who wish to speak at this point?
And to clarify, you're only looking for comment on that first section of incentives dealing with the financial incentives identified in number 2 of page 1.
Correct, only for that section.
Yeah. So of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 persons participating on the call, does anybody want to raise their hand to have any comments about those? No one is raising their hand.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Steve, please proceed. Sorry for the interruption.
That's all right, no problem. So here's the challenge that that people who move into or are considering moving into historic homes run into. I personally have run into that. I live in a house that was built in the 1890s, and the rooms are small. The configuration of the rooms was built for a whole nother generation, a whole nother use of space. So I've essentially gutted the inside of my house, but it doesn't look like a modern house. The rooms are kind of funky, and I sort of like it that way. But if you have somebody who wants to buy a home, and especially on our smaller lots, there often is a request or a thought process of, if I could only bump that back of the house off so I could put a kitchen back there and put a master bedroom on top of it, then I can reconfigure the front of the house into a modern, livable 21st century space. And often property owners are faced with the problem of not having enough space on their lot to be able to do that because of our zoning code. So our proposal here is, rather than address those issues with a, boy, let's see if we can do something about that, embrace those folks with a, yeah, let's work with you and figure out a solution. So there's 2 ways to doing that. One, which we have done in the past with a number of success stories, is work with a property owner, or more often someone who is wishing to buy a house and wants to rehab it, work with them to figure out what part of our zoning, what part of the zoning code is restricting what they want to do with their home, and how can we work with the owner and work with the PCZBA in order to make this work. How can we make it work so that we can have a livable 21st century home on a small lot, or with a home that is pushed into one corner of a lot? How can we creatively work with the zoning code to make this happen? So the 3A on the memo talks about zoning flexibility. And it is essentially telling a property owner, we will work with you to the degree that we can to make this historic home workable as a rehab. Because the alternative is, and we've seen that all too often, I'm going to tear it down because I can't have the master bedroom and I can't have the big kitchen. So let's talk, okay? The second part of this is the same concept, but here with a little bit of meat to it. This is a concept that talks to that same property owner. This is a property owner who is butting up against the maximum floor area, how big their house can be. And for landmark homes that have gone through the landmarking process, again, working with the PCZBA, who would have to approve all of this, allowing an increase in floor area ratio, and we're suggesting up to a 20% increase in the volume of their home, so that they can build the structure that is their dream home with an old footprint of an old home. And as we tell applicants, you know, that's probably on the back, it's probably on the side. We're interested in saving the streetscape and looking at the continuity of the home from one to another. So these two suggestions, we think, change the discussion from, oh, this is going to be really hard to do, into a, let's work together. Let's make this happen. We want to save that home. And here's some things that we can do that not only help you build that home, but actually, if you're adding square footage, is increasing the value of your home for future resale. So it's actually putting dollars in a homeowner's pocket. And it theoretically shouldn't have any cost to the village because property taxes will be higher if you're doing that. So what we're recommending is that these ideas that you tell us and you tell the PCZBA to go work together and come back with a set of recommendations that are based on this philosophy. That's what this is about.
I can't say I'm more excited about this. I'm thrilled with this. And full disclosure, I work for an architect, and I can see where, you know, homeowners are handcuffed by, you know, this exact type of thing. I see it over and over again. So I can tell you that it is something that's got teeth and it's got merit. It is not based on the village foregoing cash. It's based on a win-win, where we get this goal accomplished and the homeowner gets more square footage, a livable house. That's what they want to do. They want to live it in this house in 2022 or into the future. And it's hard to do that when everything is as it was 100 years ago. So I just can't say well done enough. It's great.
I would agree with that. Makes perfect sense to me. My home actually was built in 1913, and it went through a rehab. Dave Kissel had to go to all of our neighbors and get permission to increase the FAR, which he did. Somebody could have said no to that, and the house now is modern with large rooms and is maintained here in the community and is gorgeous. So that makes perfect sense to me. The only thing that I would add on the 20% is we wouldn't want it to encroach on a neighbor or some sort of a side setback or something that would create a burden. But outside of that, it's terrific.
Yeah, we agree with being a burden to the homeowner. That's why the PCZBA, it's not a matter of right. The PCZBA would have to work with the property owner to find out where that square footage is most appropriately added to the home, both for functionality and for being a good neighbor.
I agree with what everyone said so far. I think this is, like Barbara said, this is the one with teeth. I think if people are looking at a historic home, the idea that they could have a little more space and modernize it a little bit would be fantastic. My only thought here was that, you know, we've talked a lot about water in the village and impervious surface. And I think we just want to keep in mind the fact that the more that we add, the less impervious surface we have. We could be creating some problems down the road with water issues and flooding. So that was the only thing as I was looking at that, I was thinking, you know, we really try to balance in the village, bulk and impervious surfaces. And that was my only thought on that.
Good point.
Did that, Steve, I'm just wondering if that came up at all in your conversations as you guys were discussing this?
Yeah, we did talk about all of the implications of doing this. And if your property is constrained because it's one of our narrow lots, then adding additional square footage, it's not going to be possible to remediate the loss of absorption. Many of our lots, though, many of our historic homes are on lots of such size that what is constraining them is the placement of the home on the lot, not the water storage capability. So again, that's the PCZBA to figure out, and that would all be part of the application process and the solution. So again, it's the idea, yeah, we want to make this happen. We've got to be sure that we're good neighbors. We know you want to do that. We also want to be sure that we're not increasing any future water runoff, et cetera. So it's kind of changing the context of the discussion, which we think is a real positive.
Great.
Well,
Steve?
an increase in FAR could also be an increase in space that's second story above existing first story. You know, you can have an increase in FAR that's used more creatively.
Yep, absolutely. But again, it's saying, let's work it out. Let's do it. Let's work together instead of, oh boy, this is going to be really hard. Someone had a question?
Yes, Steve, I have a question. I do like the comments from Barbara and from Joy. Yes, we can make a structure workable by adding 20% to it and make it livable in a more modern time. Fine. My question to you is, there might be a perverse effect, that is, multiple homeowners might all have a 20% possibility on their house, and we end up with houses that are no longer representing a historical aspect. So the two questions I have are, have you thought about that effect? And the second thing is, you state, subject to PCZBA review, adding a 20% floor ratio. Have you thought about some effect of a limit on that 20% provision? Do you follow me?
Yeah, I follow you. So this would not be a matter of right. This would be, in effect, a negotiated agreement between a property owner who wishes to upgrade their property and the village, is represented by the PCCBA. When we have done this in the past, with property owners who have done rehabs and have looked for zoning, and we work with PCCBA, the ultimate design of the addition was part of the discussion. So I would anticipate that the PCZBA would require drawings and illustrations that would show exactly where this 20% or whatever it is, how that would affect the look and feel of the home. And working with HPC, if someone wants to take a historic home and put a 20% square footage addition in an ugly white box on the front of the house, I think we'd all go, no, we're not going to do that. So I think there is a cooperative design and functionality discussion that HPC, PCZBA, and the property owner would have jointly in order to make this work.
Thank you. Additional questions on this section, trustees? Could we please, do we have any comment from the members of the public on this item?
So the attendees on the call, participating virtually, if there's anyone who wishes to comment on these zoning incentives, if there's any comments, please raise your hand. Use the raise the hand button at the bottom of your screen. Doesn't appear to be any.
Thank you. Steve, can we move on to number 4?
Okay, last one should be pretty quick. This is really marketing. So in order for a voluntary incentive program to work, the HPC very strongly believes that the history of the village, the the ambiance of the village, what people say when they first drive into the village, and they say, what a neat place, what a place to live. And that is part of it. It certainly is the streetscape. It's also obviously the upkeep of the homes, that the property owners have maintained their homes and they have made them look as part of a contiguous whole. But we feel that to the degree that the village is looking at updating its branding, that historic preservation or the historic character of the village, the context of the village is important as part of its brand. That this is a neat place to live. It is a representative of particular time periods of the past, but with housing that is updated for contemporary life. So whatever that branding would be, that's, we think that historic preservation and the historic nature of our housing stock should be incorporated into the branding. Right now, by the way, we can also talk about the west side of town, because the terraces are historical in their own right. The terraces are one of the few remaining post-World War II communities that were developed within a concept and built by a limited number of builders. And they represent suburban post-World War II development in an almost prototypical way. I mean, there are very places you can go and drive around and see what people saw in 1960 when they were looking at homes. So that also needs to be part of the brand, that we're not just a Victorian village, but we are a village that has adapted and built its housing stock with reference to the time where that particular area of the village was developed. So it really is a comprehensive incorporation of history and suburban development in our brand. So that's the first piece. The second piece, in order to fund this, and you don't, it would be nice to have a pool of money to be able to put brochure. We need to upgrade all of our materials. We need to upgrade our process. We need to do some outreach to the community, internal self, but we also need to develop some external materials for individuals who are what we call discovering Lake Bluff. We think that there's a market for individuals who are interested in historic preservation, and to the degree that we can get the word out that that's important to us in Lake Bluff, we think there'll be an increasing demand for people moving in and rehabbing homes. So we're suggesting, again, it's easy being suggesters and not deciders, but we're suggesting that 100% of the demolition tax be applied for historic preservation purposes. Seems appropriate, doesn't it? You're going to tear down a home, we're going to use that money to move in another direction. And then the third and last one, we showed a demo of Lake Bluff online almost 2 years ago. We just need to finish this. We need to get it finished, get it up and published, and then we can start adding other things. Glenn's done a really nice job in updating the demo. For example, it links to all of the county records that are available. So if someone wants to know who their elected officials are, they can find out that. If they want to know, as a future buyer, what school district, what's the high school district, all of that is there. What the real estate taxes have been, who prior owners were, you can do all of that. Anything that's available from the county, you could get through this website. It also links to the History Museum's database. So if you want to see what information the History Museum has on your home, you could do it from Lake Bluff Online. So it's beginning to integrate multiple data sources that we have throughout the village into one place for people to go and look and do some analysis. So we are suggesting that this get finished in this village fiscal year, and it become part of a branding / communication slash recommitment to historic preservation on the part of the village as we move into the next fiscal year. And that's the result of our COVID work.
Thank you, Steve. I have one question about the Lake Bluff Online. It would be very, so now that we know that we might have a way to fund the marketing effort, it would be interesting to know what will it take to maintain Lake Bluff Online. I've seen the demo you have put together on your computer, and this is very impressive. This is a current work and a historic work at once. I think the cost of maintenance is a thing to keep in mind. So would the demolition tax proceed, would these proceed cover both marketing and maintaining that knowledge base?
I'll let Glenn answer the question of annual maintenance on the database.
Sure. So what we've tried to build is the village already pays an annual licensing fee for ArcGIS Online, and that's mostly for municipal utility services and also for some of our planning and zoning work. So the cost of hosting this, maintaining it, that's already baked in. When we release the full version of Lake Bluff Online, or quotes on full, what we've tried to do is build it intentionally in a low maintenance way. A lot of the links to other data, Chair Kraus is describing, is so that we don't have to keep or maintain that data ourselves. We're just in the business of making sure that those links out work correctly. And there's, again, a small script that generates some things locally. But it's made to be low maintenance. It's made to be maintainable without necessarily having technical expertise in-house. I guess the biggest question will be when this is out there and published in this form, if and what demand there is to extend it. Probably can't do a whole lot else to continue to grow the value of that resource without starting to pick up those types of responsibilities, President Sherlock.
Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. So I think it would be appropriate that, and we frankly haven't thought of using the demolition tax income as a way not only for the communication portion of Lake Bluff Online, but for maintenance of the database to the degree necessary. I think that's a great idea. I don't think there'll be much database maintenance in the beginning. I think what I'd be interested in is adding more links. For example, I've talked to a couple of members of the real estate community about whether they thought it would be helpful of having a real-time link identifying homes for sale in Lake Bluff. So when you add on, you sign on to Lake Bluff Online, one of the things you could look for are homes that are, you can get that online all over the place, but it might be fun to get it just in one place.
I just had a comment.
Barb, I will take your question. We have 5 minutes. I want to make sure that we address all the questions, Steve. So Barb, go ahead.
I guess in terms of the earmarking of demolition tax proceeds, I think that I'm a little bit reluctant to, it almost is creating its own fund, something that people will know this is X went in and Y went out, and we still have X minus Y in the fund, and it kind of just creates, something that needs to be tracked, almost like a fund. But I like the idea of having funding available for projects that have value, but I think we kind of go through the budget process every year and, look at what needs to be funded and what has merit. We kind of weigh them all at the same time. So I guess I'm reluctant to say that I think it's a good idea to take this source of money, earmark it, put it in a bucket, and then things that come out of it have to be X, Y, or Z. I'm a little bit reluctant. I think that the board often looks at projects and says, yes, we think this is a good idea and the time is right, and we say yes to it. And then there are other times where conditions dictate that it's not the right time. So again, I love the idea of marketing, but I'm not crazy about using specific dollars and earmarking it. And I also think that the best marketing in the whole world is somebody who got a good deal and a win-win, and they're just going to tell everybody about it, and then somebody else wants to do it. I mean, that is priceless. It's much more than any other thing that you could ever do. And I think that the zoning and all of those approaches that we talked about are win-win. And I think that's got the best chance for success. And
Thank
yeah.
you, Barb. Joy?
Thank you. Thanks, Regis. So I like the marketing idea. I also in the past have called that just the education effort of the importance of historic preservation in the village. I agree with Barb. I feel like the demolition tax. I guess I would prefer for the HPC to come to us and say, we've put together a marketing plan, or we have some marketing ideas, and here's what the cost would be, and we're asking you if we can budget that into the next fiscal budget, rather than have just a fund of money sitting there. I think that might be a little more efficient. But I do think, like, for some of the ideas that Steve, you all are thinking about, you definitely will need some budget for that to accomplish it. And I like the shout out to the terraces. Sometimes we get forgotten. I sometimes think I'm the only person who loves a split level left in Lake Bluff, but I still love it. So thank you.
Drew, can I ask real quick, what normally $32,000 a year is the average over the past 5 years of the demolition fund? Is that just going to the general fund, or is it designated for anything?
It goes to general fund. And the original nexus for those dollars for the demo tax was to go to help support the impacts on the roads, right? The idea that these heavy pieces of equipment are coming in and impacting the village's infrastructure. And it was just the idea of trying to capture some money back to go back into that.
Yeah, I personally would have no issue providing some percentage, call it 50% or something, so that the HBC knows there's a constant stream of income that they have to utilize their program. Maybe not the entire thing, but I do think there should be some money, if we're committed to this, that's allocated to the manual.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. So at this point, we are arriving at the end of this session. It would be good to actually plan for our next step. Drew?
Yeah, so it sounds like I've been taking notes, and it sounds like there was no heartburn with the administrative changes to the ordinance. I didn't hear any heartburn with those neutral changes, if you will. So that can come to the village board at an upcoming meeting. Then the zoning changes, there was a clear consensus to refer that to the PCZBA to let them go through that and study that in conjunction with the HPC. And then the other fees between there seemed to be some comfort with the new landmark incentives, not necessarily current landmark incentives. And then I don't think there's a clear consensus on the fee waiver, but those items could be referred to the finance committee for a little more drilling down. And then I think same could be said for, I guess the ultimate, how these things appear in the budget, but incorporating the marketing education, there seemed to be support with that, other than having a clear consensus for the dedicated fund source, but just the idea that activities can be considered as they brought forward with the budget considerations. So.
Thank you, Drew. So we are having to the end of this session. Steve, I am extremely appreciative to the work you have done in this document. I know that it has been many heartburns for the last few years. And so again, I'm going to say that this document shows tremendous research and most careful consideration. It is actually a very consequential work for our community, and I'm extremely grateful to what you have done and you're doing today to preserve what makes Lake Bluff today. So thank you very much. And we'll go forward with this work.
I know the HPC members that are on the phone and ones that couldn't make it tonight. Thank you as well.
I don't know if there's any final public, you didn't have any comment on the final.
So
comments.
do we have any final comments?
Yes, you do actually.
Let's
In the open Q&A. So I can let Ms. Minor make her own comment, and Mr. Bergman as well, if they'd like to. Let me allow.
This is Margaret Minor. I just wanted to thank you guys for the consideration. As we've talked, Steve and his team have done a great job to pull this all together. I think Lake Bluff Online is fantastic. It's a great tool for education and knowledge sharing, a single source of truth that doesn't require a translator. I also think that rewarding people for the behavior or the desired outcome that we aspire to is always good. So I know you have tons of priorities with finite resources, so I hope you'll kick this to the finance committee and have them evaluate that compared to the others. And it's an opportunity cost. So we're fortunate that you'll do that review. And then I just hope that the legislative changes are a stepping stone, because I still think that the legislation allows for landmarking without the homeowner's participation. And I hope that we'll have an opportunity to change that in the future.
Thank you.
And Mr. Bergman.
There we go. Yes, this is Paul Bergman. It seems to me that if you accumulate funds for the demolition fund, you accumulate funds on a rising and falling basis. Some years there's a great many demolitions, other years there's not very many. But it seems to me that if you end up with an excess of funds in a demolition fund, and that the HPC has not allocated that for a particular project, either computer upgrades or other, marketing pieces or things like that, that money could then just simply be swept into the general fund rather than having it accumulate in one great big humongous trust fund kind of account. So it could be simply it's designed to be a pay-as-you-go account, which is to be not impactful on the village finance, on the village fisc, if you will. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
That appears to be it.
Thank you. So, Steve, again, thank you. And thank you to the HPC for doing this work. And we are grateful to your dedication to this community. This concludes our committee of the whole. And at this point, I would welcome a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And we are adjourned for this meeting. It is 7:05. Let's convene in 5 minutes at 7:10. Thank you.